Hi folks, so here's something funny about writing. If you ask most writers when editing starts, they'll say something like, oh, it's after the first draft, which is technically true, but also not entirely true. Because if you're anything like me, editing actually starts way earlier than that. In fact, you're watching one of those moments right now. That thing that looks just like I'm typing up my handwritten notes. Yeah, this is secretly an editing pass, and most writers just don't even realize it. So, for a lot of my projects, I still draft by hand first. And no, it's not because it's faster. It absolutely is not faster. Really, typing is faster. Speech to text is faster. I mean, telepathy would be faster if we ever invent that. But handwriting does something useful to the brain. It slows you down just enough that the ideas actually have room to fully form. When you're writing by hand, you're not obsessing over every sentence. You're not constantly backspacing. You're just getting the story out. And trust me, those drafts look absolutely chaotic. In mine, there are arrows everywhere. I've got notes in the margin. I have sentences or words completely crossed out. And sometimes I put random reminders like fix this later, or figure out what state she's from, or why did you choose that? Go back and redo this word, but I don't have time now, blah, blah, blah. And it's just messages to myself for me to go back and literally fix these problems that my creative brain recognizes. It's a problem here, but we've got to get it out so that we can fix it. And honestly, it's just the entire energy of a first draft right there. Right, so here's where things get interesting. When you sit down later and you start typing that handwritten draft into a manuscript, your brain starts running the story through itself again. And suddenly you start noticing things. The sentence here feels a little bit clunky. Oh, right, that line of dialogue sounds kind of weird if you say it out loud. And you realize that you've used the same word like 5 times in one paragraph. And for me, it's frankly. Because frankly, she couldn't understand this, and frankly, he didn't know why, and frankly, I don't know why I do that. I'm not in love with the word frankly, I swear. But my brain likes to throw it in there every other sentence if I don't, weed it out there. And in looking at this, you'll find moments that probably should have a little more emotional weight. Throw some italics in here. Really specify this word. Maybe add an ellipses or 2 or 3. And your brain recognizes this as you're transcribing. So what do? You fix it. You don't need a big rewrite. Just a few small adjustments here and there. You smooth out the sentence. Swap a word around. Tighten up paragraphs so it reads a little cleaner. And you keep going. But if you do that across an entire chapter or an entire manuscript, what you've actually done is pretty substantial amount of editing in a hidden editing pass. And speaking of which, so this is what I call the hidden editing pass, because technically you're not sitting down saying, all right, editing mode, lock in. No, you're just transferring the draft from paper to digital, from ink to typing. And you're moving the story from notebook to computer, or whatever typing mechanism you've got going on. So cognitively, something really important here is happening. You're reading the story again. You're telling yourself the story again that you're creating, and you're hearing the rhythm of prose. You feel the pacing. You're noticing little things that your drafting brain didn't catch the first time. And because you're not hardcore editing mode, you don't overthink it. You just fix the obvious stuff and keep going. And which honestly, this is the best kind of editing. So, why is this stage helpful? Well, let's go ahead and get the elephant in the room taken care of here. Not Obviously, not everyone drafts this way or edits this way. There are plenty of writers who go straight to the keyboard. My gosh, I wish I could. It would go so much faster. And I love voice to text, where I'm just speaking the story as it creates in my mind. And I so desperately want to get there as fast as possible. But for me, I have to transcribe it. I have to write it first, because once my hand knows the story, I can tell it to you. But until my hand knows the story, it's going to be clunky. So I have to write it first. And if you're the kind of writer that can go straight to the keyboard, one, I'm so jealous. Stop flaunting that. I'm so jealous of you. And two, it's totally valid. Because, quite frankly, you've got that mystic step and mystic ability that just lets you go ahead and put it right on the screen. Unfortunately for me, the one thing that handwriting to transcription does is it forces the story through my brain twice. Once when I've written it, and again when I type it. And for me, that little bit of distance helps a lot, because for me, writing and reading are two different mental modes. When I'm drafting, I'm totally in creative brain. And when I'm typing, I slip a little bit into my reader brain. And the reader brain notices things differently. So, during this stage, I usually end up fixing three main things. First of all, awkward sentences. You know the ones. They technically make sense, but they just feel lumpy, clunky, uneven. So automatically I go in and smooth those out. Very honest, half the time I don't recognize I'm doing it. As I'm reading the transcript, I'm possibly shifting words around and as I'm actually typing it. So sometimes I go back and I read my my first drafts, my handwritten first drafts, and then I look at the first time I've transcribed it, because I keep my files and just progressively save new files with different dates on the end. So if I ever miss something or I've lost something, I can go back and fix it. Ask me why I do it that way specifically, because I've been burned very badly for losing whole manuscripts before to wingdings. Myths of Indolia. Anyway, I just automatically go in and smooth those sentences out. And like I said, sometimes I don't even realize I'm doing it. Second thing, repetition. I've mentioned it before. My draft brain loves repeating words, especially weird sounding words or strange words that I know have obscure backgrounds. It will just start throwing them in my drafts. I don't notice it when I'm writing fast and trying to get dialogue out and trying to get what's the image in my head onto ink on the page. But when I'm doing the type draft later, suddenly it's like it's everywhere. And I can go, my reader brain will start to clock that and go, oh, ew, nobody's going to want to read that word over and over again. What are you doing, MT? Come on, fix that. And I just take care of it there. Sometimes I just strike through, take the word out entirely. Sometimes I just, go through and say, okay, I make a little parens around it when I'm typing it and saying, change this word. Find a good word later, not this one. And the third thing is missing clarity. All right, this one can be so obscure to try and describe, but when I'm drafting, there's a scene that's in my head that I'm desperately trying to get on paper, and I may just make notes about the scene, about the atmosphere, what I'm seeing in my mind's eye. And when I get back to transcribe it later, it doesn't make sense. It's like, the room was dark. Mental note of a foggy gauze-like atmosphere. What's a foggy gauze? Okay, nobody knows. But anyway, that's the kind of thing. So I will make notes to myself and what makes sense at the time. But when I go back and I'm transcribing it, I realize that I am missing a lot of clarity there. My reader's not going to know what the bleeding heck a foggy gauze is. So we're going to have to fix that right then and there. Let's change it. Let's go to, a gauzy mist. Maybe that's a little bit more more sensical, there's a word, catch me editing real time, makes a little bit more sense at the time. So sometimes I'll add small details or just clarify a character action, like she moved her arm. Okay, she moved her arm to the right, not just she moved her arm, because that could mean anything. And sometimes if I'm writing a big emotional stinger, I might give that moment a little extra beat, a little extra time to develop, to cook, to show through and shine, to reach in there and get those gut-wrenching tears that I love to do to my readers when I'm writing those emotional stingers. That's the moment I'll take time to do that. It's nothing huge, but it is enough to make the story flow better. Okay, so let's talk about messy drafts for a minute. Honestly, messy drafts are perfectly fine, and I need you to repeat this with me. I'm going to hold your hand while I say this. Repeat after me. The job of a first draft is not to be beautiful or perfect. It's just to exist. All right, I know you're triggered. Come back with me now and understand. The job of the first draft is just to exist. You need to get the story out of your brain and onto the page. Editing can fix sentences. Editing can fix pacing. Editing can fix dialogue. But editing cannot fix a blank page, my loves. So if your draft looks like absolute chaos, congratulations, you're doing it right. But you've got to get the words on the page. Don't hate me. It's a little tough love here from the author sphere. Right, so kind of doing all of this to say, the next time you're transferring a handwritten draft, be it for your manuscript, for a script that you're writing, for your content creation notes, I want you to remember that you're not only typing, you are quietly strengthening the story. It's a hidden edit. Most of the time you don't even recognize you're doing it. And you're doing it one sentence at a time. And sometimes the best editing passes, the cleanest adjustments, the greatest shift to your arc, sometimes those are the ones we don't even realize we're doing. Alright, thank you for joining me on this little bit of a yap and a ramble as I'm getting all this stuff transcribed over, because I have to do all of chapter 1 by hand, and it's a lot of typing over into my notes before I can really fly. And I'm so looking forward to when I can really fly, because I want to get this story on the digital screen so bad. But thank you for joining me, and if you're interested in more of my work, you know where to find me. And now you know. I'll see you in the next video.